So authoritarians are actually quite a well-studied bunch in history. There's a very large sample size to select from. We've had authoritarians running different parts of the world for thousands of years. We can look at various leaders back in ancient Rome. A lot of the Roman emperors were complete authoritarians, from Julius Caesar to Nero to Caligula to a whole range of very dysfunctional, despotic leaders. We can look at more modern times to a number of leaders in various parts of the world, whether that, of course, in Europe as Hitler, Mussolini, whether that's certain African leaders and Middle Eastern leaders like Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. We can look to the Far East, Pol Pot. We can look to a range of South American leaders. We can look, of course, at the former Soviet Union and Stalin and a whole range of their leaders too. So we have a very large selection, a whole panoply of authoritarian leaders. And because of that, we have some pretty good data now on the characteristics of an authoritarian personality. What is the psychology of an authoritarian? This is actually well studied, well documented, and well understood now. And there are basically 6 fundamental things that authoritarians tend to have in their personality structure. 6 essential characteristics that seem to be embedded within their psychology again and again and again in pretty much every case. So, the first one is that authoritarians tend to be vain and shallow. They tend to be very obsessed with their appearance. They tend to put a lot of effort into exactly what they look like and how people see them on a physical level. The other thing is that they're allergic to learning. They're not interested in learning new things. They're not intellectually curious. They're not broad-minded in terms of inviting different viewpoints and ideas. They're not interested in studying. A great example of this in history is Nero. His political tutor, a mentor who was with him since his childhood, basically gave up at one point, realizing that this guy is learning nothing and able to learn nothing. And a famous quote came from him, which is that it's impossible to learn that which you think you already know. And that's the problem with authoritarians. They think they know everything, so it's impossible to teach them. The other third characteristic of authoritarians is that they're addicted to attention. If they do not exist in the eyes of others, it's as if they do not exist at all. They must have the attention, the affection, the adulation of others. Otherwise, they don't exist, because they don't have any self-perception of their own. They don't have any self-concept that they can be comfortable with and sit with. They need other people to see them in order for them to even feel like they exist. So they crave attention in a very severe way.
And in the morning, I will stand before them again, and I will sing. And my voice will reach inside them, take hold of their hearts. And actually, I should get home and work on the song.
The fourth characteristic is that they tend to react to failure with rage, with abject rage. Because their own self-construct is so weak and fragile, they cannot accept, they cannot allow in any thought that they've failed. And so they react against it, trying to push it away. Their reaction to any failure is with rage, whereas with other people, reaction to failure might be to learn, might be to accept, might be to acknowledge, might be to apologize. It might be to try to incorporate that into future learning and grow from it and move on. But authoritarians won't do that. It's linked to the inability to actually learn anything at all. They don't want to learn from any failures. In fact, they don't want to acknowledge any failures because they're so fragile.
Do it! And don't any of you dare say there's no money! Don't you dare!
Now, the other thing they have is a thirst for vengeance. Because they're so afraid of criticism, so afraid of failure, they have this thirst for vengeance. Anybody who's ever criticized them must be punished. They must extract something back from anybody who's ever punished them, criticized them, been against them, or challenged them. So there's a huge thirst for vengeance that goes along with this fear of criticism or fear of any kind of attack. And the final characteristic of despots, of authoritarian leaders, is this inability to relinquish power. They never accept the need to stand down because they believe that the only people who can ever do a good job is them. They personally are the only ones who can deliver, and they have to stay on and on and on. Look at the most recent and current example of authoritarian in our world today that we know about, Vladimir Putin. He was actually elected when Russia, for that small window of time, was a democracy. Now, we can talk about the shenanigans he engaged in to perform certain things that enabled him to win that election, but the vote itself was fair. Now, very soon after that, he pretty much abolished free and fair elections and then just ran sham elections. And according to his last election, he won 80-odd% of the vote, which is, of course, total nonsense. And he's been in power since the year 2000. So that's 25 years and counting. He's well into his 70s now, and he's carrying on as if he was just elected for his first term. They cannot relinquish power. And one of the reasons for that is because they don't want to accept that anyone could ever be better than them. And they're also afraid that their real record could then be poured over once they're out of office. That once they're no longer in power, the ability to criticize them, the ability to actually start to acknowledge some of the things they actually did, then arises, and they cannot tolerate that as long as they're alive. So they cannot leave power because of their psychological structure. And even if they came to power in a democratic system, which was the case both for Hitler and for Putin, they cannot allow it to continue because it means a threat to their psyche. The idea that other people can then look over their records and make judgments about them. They will not allow that, so they will not leave power. Now this brings us to the fundamental way in which authoritarians essentially are misunderstood. People usually think authoritarians are strong leaders. They're strong people and strong leaders. The opposite is actually the case. Authoritarian leaders are very weak people. They have very fragile psyches. They're very scared of other people. They're very scared of any criticism. Because fundamentally, they're scared of themselves. They know that they're not very capable. Deep down inside in their unconscious, it's not something they'll ever acknowledge consciously, but they know they're not very capable. They know they're not very special. They know that they're not a chosen person, and that makes them very afraid of other people. And in the end, they create barriers and structures around them to prevent hearing any criticism. They hire a lot of yes men, and of course they're usually men who are going to answer to them and tell them how great they are. They cannot live in anything but a bubble, but then the world has to live with a very weak leader who brings them to all sorts of calamitous results, because that weakness means that they have to constantly prove themselves to themselves. They have to constantly prove that they are worthy of love and affection and attention and all of the adulation that they crave. And in order to keep proving that, they do disastrous things like engaging in imperial conquest, like conquering other lands, like conquering their neighbors. This is something that authoritarians almost always try and do because of that deep insecurity that exists within them. Now, does any of this sound like anybody you know? Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics. And I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email newsletter, which you can subscribe to. At the top of the channel, you'll see a web address. Please go there and subscribe to my newsletter. That way you can stay in touch with the videos I'm making. At least we can keep the content flowing. So I hope you can do that. And I hope we can keep talking and also gain clarity, not just about what's happening right now, but how we can get through this, how we can improve things to make a better tomorrow together. Thank you.